The gathering is at my parents' house, which means it's on their terms, in their space, with their narrative about who we all are firmly established. It's someone's birthday, my sister's, I think, or maybe my brother's milestone anniversary. The specifics blur together after years of similar events. What matters is the ritual: family gathering, extended relatives present, a few family friends invited to witness our closeness, our success, our functional dynamic. About 30 people scattered through the main floor. Aunts, uncles, cousins I see twice a year, neighbors who've known us since childhood, my brother's college friends who've become part of the extended circle. The house smells like catered food. My mother stopped cooking for these events years ago, preferring the control of professional presentation over homemade authenticity. I'm standing near the kitchen island, drink in hand, half listening to a conversation about real estate investments. My brother is holding court, explaining his latest property acquisition with the confidence of someone who's never questioned whether people want to hear him speak. My sister adds commentary about market trends, something she picked up from her husband who works in finance. I'm 32 years old. I work as a database administrator for a mid-sized healthcare company. The job is stable, pays decently, offers good benefits. Nothing glamorous, nothing conversation-worthy, nothing that makes people lean in with interest at parties. My brother is 35, a real estate developer who flips properties and manages rental portfolios. My sister is 29, married to a wealth manager, living in a house that shows up beautifully on Instagram. They're the success stories, the ones who turned out well, the ones my parents bring up proudly when talking to friends. And then there's me. The conversation shifts naturally, the way it always does at these gatherings, toward comparative assessments of life progress. Who's buying houses, who's getting promoted, whose children are excelling, who's planning impressive vacations. It's never framed as competition, but that's exactly what it is, a gentle scorekeeping of who's winning at life. Michael's doing incredibly well, my mother says, referring to my brother. Just closed on that commercial property downtown, the one that was in the news. People murmur approval. Someone asks a follow-up question. Michael answers with practiced humility that doesn't quite hide his pride. And Sarah's been traveling so much, my mother continues, turning to my sister. Thailand, Greece, that trip to Dubai, her Instagram is just gorgeous. More approving sounds. Sarah smiles, deflects slightly, but clearly enjoys the recognition. Then the conversation pauses. That awkward beat where my mother realizes she's praised 2 of her 3 children and now faces the social obligation to include me. I can see her calculating, trying to find something praiseworthy to say about her middle child who never quite lived up to the family's standards of excellence. Before she can speak, my uncle, my father's brother, a man who made his money in manufacturing and never lets anyone forget it, laughs and says with casual certainty, "Well, he's always been the weak one." The sentence hangs in the air like a physical object, not harsh in tone, almost affectionate, the way you might comment on a family dog who's afraid of thunderstorms. Just a simple observation, a fact everyone knows and accepts. I watch faces around the room. A few people freeze mid-conversation. Someone's smile becomes uncertain. A cousin glances at me, then away quickly. The neighbors shift uncomfortably. But no one speaks up. No one corrects him. No one says, "That's not true," or "That's not fair," or "That's an unkind thing to say." My mother doesn't defend me. My father, standing across the room, continues his conversation as if nothing was said. My brother and sister exchange a brief glance, but say nothing. The family friends who've known me since childhood stay silent. The word weak settles over me like a verdict that's been waiting years to be pronounced publicly. I force a smile. That practiced expression that says, "I'm in on the joke, this doesn't hurt, I'm secure enough to laugh at myself." I take a sip of my drink, nod slightly as if acknowledging a harmless observation, and let the conversation move on. Someone asks about the catering. Someone else mentions a movie they saw. The moment passes, absorbed back into the general flow of the evening. But the word stays with me. Weak. Not unsuccessful, not unmotivated, not unlucky. Weak. As in fundamentally deficient. As in lacking the essential strength that my siblings possess. As in the one who couldn't quite measure up, who needed to be carried, who would always require assistance because he lacked the capacity to stand alone. I stay at the party for another hour, play my role, smile at appropriate moments, respond when spoken to, perform the part of the weak one who's grateful to be included, who doesn't make trouble, who accepts his place in the family hierarchy, and I remember every face that stayed silent, every person who heard that assessment and chose not to contradict it, every family member who confirmed through their silence that yes, that's accurate, that's who he is, that's always who he's been. My uncle says it. My family endorses it through inaction. 30 people witness it. Not one speaks up. I drive home that night with the word echoing in my head. Weak. The label I've been carrying my whole life, finally spoken aloud where everyone could hear it, where it became official family canon. And I make a decision in the darkness of that drive home. I'm done trying to prove otherwise, done seeking their approval, done waiting for them to notice that I'm more than their assessment of me. If they think I'm weak, they can think it, but they won't know anything else about me. Won't know what I build, what I accomplish, what I become. They've seen the last of anything real from me. Before we continue, I need to pause here for something important. If you're finding this story compelling, don't forget to like and subscribe, and hit that hype button to boost this episode's reach. Drop a comment below with your city or country. I'm always curious where viewers are joining from, and it helps me understand who's connecting with these stories. Now let's get back to what happened next. The thing about being labeled weak is that it's not usually based on actual weakness. It's based on not performing strength the way your family recognizes it. Let me explain what weak meant in my family. I was quiet where my siblings were loud. I listened more than I talked. I thought before speaking, which meant I spoke less frequently and less confidently than people who didn't bother thinking first. In my family, that read as weakness. I avoided conflict. Not because I couldn't handle it, but because I found it exhausting and often pointless. When my brother and sister fought, and they fought constantly growing up, I'd leave the room rather than take sides or join in. In my family, that read as weakness. I chose a practical career over a flashy one. Database administration isn't sexy. It doesn't come with exciting stories to tell at parties. It doesn't generate Instagram-worthy moments or impressive business cards that make people pause. In my family, that read as weakness. I dated cautiously, married late, lived in a modest apartment, while my siblings bought houses. I saved money rather than displaying it. I built security rather than status. In my family, all of that read as weakness. The label started early. Maybe when I was 7 or 8, when I cried at my grandmother's funeral and my father told me to toughen up. Maybe when I was 12 and got cut from the basketball team and my brother made jokes about it for months. Maybe when I was 16 and didn't want to fight a kid who'd been harassing me, and my father looked at me with something like disappointment. Whenever it started, it crystallized over time, became accepted family truth. The strong ones were Michael and Sarah, assertive, confident, competitive, willing to fight for what they wanted. The weak one was me, avoidant, cautious, content with less. My parents never corrected this narrative. If anything, they reinforced it through patterns of trust and responsibility. When something important needed handling, they called Michael. When they needed advice, they asked Sarah. When they needed help with something they considered menial or unimportant, they asked me. Michael got asked to review their financial planning. I got asked to help move furniture. Sarah got consulted on major family decisions. I got informed afterward. The hierarchy was clear, consistent, and never questioned. And I accepted it. For years, I accepted it. because fighting it felt pointless, because trying to prove yourself to people who've already decided what you are is exhausting, because at some level, I started believing maybe they were right. Maybe I was the weak one, the one who couldn't quite measure up, the one who'd always need the stronger siblings to succeed where I couldn't. The party comment was just the moment that narrative went public. The moment what was whispered in family conversations got said out loud where guests could hear it. The moment I had to face that this wasn't just my parents' opinion or my siblings' assessment. This was how the entire extended family saw me. The weak one, always had been, always would be, and no one, not one person in that room full of family and friends, thought that label was worth contradicting. After the party, life continued as if nothing happened. No apology from my uncle, no follow-up from my parents, no text from my siblings acknowledging the awkwardness. It was like the comment never occurred. Except, it occurred. I heard it. 30 other people heard it. It was said, received, and absorbed into the permanent record of family truth. But because I didn't make a scene, didn't confront anyone, didn't demand acknowledgement or apology, the family moved on. They moved on because my reaction confirmed the label. Weak people don't make waves. They endure. They accept. They smile and stay quiet. I stopped going to family events as frequently, not dramatically. I didn't announce a boycott or make a statement. I just started having conflicts. Work deadlines, prior commitments, fatigue, illness, the endless excuses available to people who don't want to say, I don't want to be there. My mother would call, "We're having dinner Sunday. Will you come?" "I've got a project due Monday. Need to work. Can't you take a break for a few hours?" "Really buried right now. Maybe next time." Next time would come. Same pattern, same excuses, same gradual withdrawal that nobody questioned because it fit the narrative. Of course he's busy with work. Of course he's stressed about deadlines. Of course he needs to focus on the modest life he's built because he doesn't have the natural strength and capability that would let him balance everything effortlessly like his siblings do. My brother noticed first, called me one evening about 6 months after the party. "You've been distant," he said. No greeting, just accusation. "Been busy." "Busy for 6 months? It's been a heavy year." "Mom's worried about you." I almost laughed at that. Mom was worried, not apologetic, not reflective about what happened at the party, not concerned that maybe calling her son weak in front of guests might have consequences, just worried that I wasn't showing up to perform my role in the family dynamic. "I'm fine," I said, "just focused on work." "You should come to things more. Family's important." "I know." "Then act like it." I wanted to ask, what does family mean when they call you weak and no one defends you? What does showing up accomplish when your presence is just confirmation of their lowest opinion of you? But I didn't ask those questions, because asking them would require vulnerability, would require admitting hurt, would require believing that the answers might matter. Instead, I said, "I'll try to make the next one." I didn't make the next one, or the one after that, or most of the ones after that. I went to the mandatory events, Christmas, Thanksgiving, the big milestone birthdays where absence would be unforgivably conspicuous. I showed up, performed pleasantness, left as early as socially acceptable. But I stopped trying, stopped seeking their approval, stopped sharing details of my life, stopped caring whether they thought I was successful or impressive or worth their respect. They thought I was weak? Fine. They could think that. They could think it forever. But they wouldn't know anything else about me. They wouldn't know that I'd started taking online courses in financial planning and investment strategy. They wouldn't know that I'd paid off all my student loans 2 years early. They wouldn't know that I'd started building an investment portfolio, small at first, but growing steadily. They wouldn't know that the weak one was teaching himself to be strong in ways they'd never see, never measure, never acknowledge. Because strength they can't recognize doesn't threaten their narrative. And I needed them to keep thinking I was weak. Needed them comfortable in their assessment. needed them to never look too closely at what I was actually doing with my life. So I stayed distant, stayed quiet, let them believe what they wanted to believe, and started building something they'd never know about until it was too late. 10 years is a long time, long enough to build something substantial, long enough to transform from one version of yourself into another, long enough to become unrecognizable if people aren't paying attention. And my family wasn't paying attention. Year 1, I threw myself into work. Not because I loved database administration. It was fine, competent, useful work, but not passionate work. I threw myself into it because it was quantifiable. Hours worked, problems solved, systems improved, metrics that proved I wasn't weak, even if no one was watching those metrics but me. The healthcare company where I worked was expanding their digital infrastructure, migrating decades of paper records into integrated database systems while maintaining HIPAA compliance across multiple state jurisdictions. It was complex, high-stakes work. One mistake could expose patient data. One security gap could trigger regulatory enforcement worth millions in fines. I specialized in the places where other people saw only risk, dove into the technical documentation, learned the regulatory frameworks inside and out, built redundant systems that would fail safely rather than catastrophically, became the person who could explain to nervous executives why our compliance architecture was sound, why our data security was robust, why they could sleep at night despite the liability we were managing. I got promoted to senior administrator in month 9, took on more complex projects, started specializing in data security and compliance frameworks, which paid significantly better than general database work. My salary increased from $67,000 to $91,000, a 35% jump in 1 year. I told no one in my family. At Christmas that year, when my mother asked how work was going, I said, "Fine, busy." She nodded and changed the subject to ask about my dating life, which was non-existent and therefore not worth discussing. Year 2. I started investing seriously. Not day trading, not cryptocurrency gambling, not risky speculation that would make good stories at parties. Index funds, dividend stocks, retirement accounts maxed out, boring wealth-building strategies that financial advisors recommend and most people ignore because they're not exciting. I read books on personal finance, listened to podcasts during my commute, learned about tax-advantaged accounts and compound interest and the power of consistent contributions over time. Discovered that getting rich slowly is actually easier than getting rich quickly. It just requires patience instead of luck. I was making $95,000 a year by then after another small raise, living on $50,000. The apartment was modest, 1 bedroom, older building, nothing impressive to photograph for social media. I drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic that was paid off and reliable. I cooked most meals at home. I bought clothes from Target and middle-tier department stores during sales. My lifestyle looked exactly like what my family expected. Modest, unremarkable, the life of someone making enough to be comfortable, but not enough to be impressive. Meanwhile, I was banking $45,000 a year in savings and investments, building a foundation they couldn't see. My family assumed I was still living paycheck to paycheck in my modest apartment, probably struggling with student loans like most people my age. I never corrected that assumption. When my brother mentioned his latest property purchase or my sister talked about her husband's bonus, I smiled and nodded and said things like, "That's great," without offering comparable updates from my own life. Because I'd learned that invisibility was protection, that being underestimated meant being left alone, that people who think you're doing okay but not great don't ask detailed questions about your finances. Year 3. I met Rachel at a professional conference. She was a project manager at a client company, presenting on change management strategies for large-scale system implementations, smart and self-contained in a way that felt familiar. We talked during a networking break, actual conversation, not networking theater, exchanged cards, followed up via email. We dated carefully, both of us having learned caution from previous relationships. No dramatic declarations, No rushing into commitment, just gradual trust and growing partnership. We talked about money early. Both of us had financial goals. Both of us were savers. Both of us valued security over status. The compatibility was rare and precious. My family met her once at Christmas. They were polite but uninterested. She wasn't flashy like Sarah's husband with his wealth management credentials and his expensive car. Didn't have an impressive title that sparked conversation or generated follow-up questions. Just a normal person living a normal life, working a normal job. They didn't see what I saw, someone who valued stability over status, who built things quietly, who understood that real strength is often invisible, who'd also learned that being underestimated was sometimes a gift. We got engaged after 2 years, married 6 months later. Small wedding, immediate family only, no big production. We spent $8,000 total on the wedding. Ceremony, small reception, photographer, everything. My sister had spent $60,000 on hers 3 years earlier. My parents didn't comment on the disparity, but I saw the glances. The unspoken assessment that we were doing it cheap because we couldn't afford better. They were half right. We could have afforded more. We chose not to, because the wedding was one day, our marriage was forever, and we'd rather invest in the forever than perform wealth for one day. Rachel and I combined our finances carefully. She'd been saving aggressively too, working in corporate project management for 6 years, living below her means, maxing out her 401k, building her own quiet fortress of financial security. Together, we had nearly $200,000 in investments. Combined household income of $180,000, no debt except my small remaining student loan balance, which we could have paid off but chose to manage strategically for credit-building purposes. My family knew none of this. They came to our modest apartment after the wedding, saw our second-hand furniture and our basic kitchen and our one shared car, and confirmed their existing assessment. Doing okay, not great, nothing worth being jealous of. They didn't know that doing okay was camouflage, that the modest apartment was temporary strategy, that the shared car was because we didn't need 2 cars, not because we couldn't afford 2 cars. They didn't know because I'd stopped telling them things 3 years earlier, stopped sharing updates, stopped seeking validation, just lived my life quietly while they lived theirs loudly. Year 4, we bought our first house. Nothing fancy, 1,200 square feet, 3 bedrooms, older construction in a decent neighborhood. Purchase price, $240,000. We put down 20%, $48,000, to avoid PMI and secured a 3.5% fixed mortgage. Monthly payment, including taxes and insurance, $2,400, less than we'd been spending on rent. My parents saw the house once, shortly after we moved in. My mother commented that it was cozy, which is what people say when they mean small. My father asked if we'd stretched ourselves financially, if we were comfortable with the mortgage, if we'd thought this through. I assured him we'd been conservative. Hadn't shared that we'd been approved for a $400,000 mortgage and had chosen something well below our ceiling. Hadn't mentioned that we could have bought in cash if we'd wanted to, but leveraging cheap debt made more sense than tying up capital. They left thinking we'd bought what we could barely afford. I let them think it. Meanwhile, Rachel got promoted. Her salary jumped from $75,000 to $95,000. We were now a household earning $190,000 annually, living in a house with a $1,400 mortgage, still driving one paid-off car, still living like we made half what we actually made. The gap between income and expenses, all invested. Every month, without fail, money flowed into retirement accounts, brokerage accounts, index funds. Money working while we slept, compounding quietly, building wealth that would take decades to fully materialize, but was already substantial. By the end of year 4, combined net worth, $280,000. And I was 36 years old. Rachel was 33, and neither of us had peaked in our careers yet. Year 5, I changed jobs. The healthcare company where I'd worked for 7 years was fine, stable, reliable. But another healthcare network was building out a regional data infrastructure, bigger scope, more complexity, better compensation. They offered me director of data systems, managing a team of 8, overseeing database architecture for a multi-state operation, ensuring regulatory compliance for millions of patient records across different jurisdictions with different requirements. Salary, $145,000, plus annual bonus structure that could add another $20,000. I mentioned the job change to my family once in passing at a holiday dinner. Yeah, new role, similar work, just bigger organization. Michael asked if it was more money. I said a bit, which he took to mean modest raise, maybe 10%. He nodded and changed the subject to his latest property development. I didn't mention that a bit meant a 50% increase from my previous base salary. Didn't mention the bonus structure. Didn't mention that I was now making more than my brother had been making before his business started failing, though I didn't know about the failure yet. That was still 2 years away. Rachel got promoted again that same year. Program director. Salary, $130,000. We were now a household earning $275,000 annually, more than either of my siblings, more than my parents had ever earned combined in their peak years. And we looked like we were doing fine but not great, living in our modest house, driving our reliable car, shopping at Target, eating at Chipotle, living a life that looked solidly middle class while actually building toward financial independence. Combined investments crossed $400,000. We talked about having kids, decided to wait, wanted financial independence first, wanted options, wanted to be in a position where having a child was a choice made from abundance rather than a risk taken from necessity. Year 6, my parents had a health scare, my father's heart, nothing catastrophic but serious enough to require surgery and recovery time. Triple bypass, major procedure, week in the hospital, months of recovery, expensive even with insurance. I visited the hospital regularly, brought flowers, magazines, books, asked about prognosis, talked to doctors when invited, offered to help with logistics, pharmacy runs, grocery shopping, whatever they needed. My brother and sister were there constantly, managing doctors, coordinating care, being visible and involved. Michael took time off work to be there. Sarah flew in from across the country. They were present in the way that family is supposed to be present in crisis. I stayed in the background, checked in regularly, offered practical help when asked, but didn't compete for the role of primary caretaker. That was Michael and Sarah's territory, the strong ones, the capable ones, the ones trusted with important things. They handled it capably. Took shifts staying with my father, managed medical decisions, coordinated with insurance companies. My father recovered. Life returned to normal. During that crisis, sitting in a hospital waiting room, my parents mentioned money stress, medical bills piling up, insurance complications, unexpected costs. The out-of-pocket maximum was $12,000, which they'd hit. Then there were costs insurance didn't cover. The private recovery nurse, the special medical equipment, the modifications to their house to accommodate my father's limited mobility during recovery. They mentioned it in passing, not asking for help directly, just venting frustration about the financial stress layered on top of the medical stress. Michael offered to help, said he could cover some of the costs, make it easier. My parents accepted gratefully. I said nothing about our financial position. Nothing about the fact that $12,000 was less than we saved in a single quarter. Nothing about the fact that we could have covered every cost without blinking, without it changing our lifestyle or our plans at all. Because they didn't need to know. Because Michael wanted to be the hero, and I didn't need to compete for that role. Because some petty part of me enjoyed knowing we could help and choosing not to offer. Enjoyed the secret knowledge that the weak one had resources they couldn't imagine while the strong one stretched himself financially to help. 3 months later, I'd learned that Michael's offer to help had actually deepened his financial problems, that he'd borrowed to cover those medical costs because his cash reserves were already depleted. that his generosity was actually desperation in disguise. But I didn't know that yet. I just knew he'd helped and I hadn't, and my parents saw that as confirmation of what they'd always believed. Michael was strong and capable and generous. I was weak and limited and absent. Year 7. We bought an investment property, small duplex in a neighborhood adjacent to ours. Purchase price, $280,000. Both units were rented, stable tenants, lease agreements in place, rental income, $2,800 month, mortgage, taxes, insurance, $2,200 month, net cash flow, $600 month, plus equity building, plus long-term appreciation, real estate investing, like my brother. Except we bought conservatively, positive cash flow from day one, tenants already in place, modest property that didn't require significant updates. Built equity slowly rather than flipping aggressively. We didn't talk about it at family gatherings, didn't post photos on social media, didn't make it part of our identity or our story, just owned it, collected rent, built equity, used the cash flow to accelerate debt payoff on our primary residence. Michael mentioned his property portfolio at a family dinner that year, talked about the 15 properties he owned, the expansion strategy, the growth potential. Everyone listened with admiration, asked questions about his business acumen, praised his entrepreneurial spirit. I didn't mention that his leverage was dangerous, that owning 15 properties with high debt loads was risky in a market that could turn. Didn't mention that our one duplex with positive cash flow was probably more valuable than his entire portfolio if you subtracted the debt. Just smiled and nodded and said, "That's impressive," and let him have the spotlight. Year 8. I got promoted again, VP of Data Systems. Salary, $185,000 plus bonus. Total compensation now approaching $220,000. Rachel's salary had increased with cost of living adjustments to $140,000. Combined household income over $350,000. We looked exactly the same. Same house, same car, same modest lifestyle, still shopping at Target, still eating at Chipotle, still living like we made $100,000 total instead of more than 3 times that. The gap? All invested. Every dollar beyond what we needed to live comfortably went into retirement accounts, taxable investment accounts, real estate equity, building wealth so steadily, so systematically, that the number barely felt real. Combined net worth crossed $700,000. We were 40 and 37 respectively, on track to hit millionaire status within 2 years, on track to have enough by our mid-40s, that magical number where you could theoretically stop working and live indefinitely on investment returns. Not that we wanted to stop working, but options matter. Security matters. Knowing you could walk away if you needed to matters. Year 9. We took a vacation to Japan. 3 weeks, first-class flights, luxury hotels, private tours. The kind of trip Sarah posted about on Instagram when she went to Dubai, except we posted nothing. Total cost, $18,000. We could afford it easily without impacting our financial plans. It was a rounding error on our annual savings. But we told no one, didn't mention it before we left, didn't post about it while there, didn't show photos after we returned. My family thought we spent our vacations camping in state parks, which we also did because we genuinely enjoyed camping. But they had no idea what else we did, what we could afford, what we'd built. That same year, we paid off our primary mortgage, just wrote a check for the remaining $140,000 balance. No more payment. House owned free and clear. My family didn't know. At Christmas, when my parents asked how the house was going, I said good, no issues. Didn't mention that no issues included no mortgage. Year 10. Net worth crossed $850,000. I was 42 years old. Rachel was 39. We had no debt, not our house, not the duplex, not a single credit card balance or car loan. Significant assets, career stability, options most people dream about. Rachel was pregnant. We'd waited deliberately, built the foundation first, made sure we were ready financially and emotionally. Our daughter would be born into security, into options, into parents who'd built something solid before adding another life to the equation. and my family still thought I was weak, still thought I needed their guidance and support, still thought I was the one who never quite succeeded. They thought this because I let them, because I'd learned that being underestimated was a gift, that invisibility was protection, that people who think you're weak don't bother to look closely enough to see what you actually are. And then, in year 10, 3 months after I turned 42, my phone rang with a number I didn't immediately recognize. It was my brother. His voice sounded wrong, tight, strained, desperate. The confidence replaced by something I'd never heard from him before. Fear. "We need to talk," he said. "Family emergency." And I knew, immediately and certainly, that everything was about to change. The decade of invisible growth was about to become very visible, but not in the way they expected. Michael asked if he could come over. Not invited me to their house, not suggested a restaurant, wanted to come to my place. That alone told me this was serious. He arrived that evening, looking older than I remembered. The confident swagger replaced by something diminished. He sat in our living room, the modest, comfortable living room he'd never visited before, and struggled to find words. "It's bad," he said finally. "Really bad." Rachel offered coffee. He accepted gratefully, wrapped his hands around the mug like he needed the warmth. "How bad?" I asked. "Bankruptcy bad. Complete financial collapse bad. Everything gone bad." I let the silence extend, let him fill it. "You know the market's been tough the last 18 months, he started. "Real estate's been volatile. What worked for 15 years stopped working. Values dropped, financing got expensive, deals that looked solid started falling apart." I nodded. I knew. I'd been watching the market carefully, adjusting our investment strategy accordingly. But I didn't mention this. "I was leveraged," Michael continued. "More than I should have been. I thought I could ride it out, thought values would recover, but they didn't. Not fast enough. Tenants started defaulting, properties went vacant, and I was holding mortgages on 15 properties I couldn't fill." "Jesus," I said quietly. "I tried to restructure, tried to sell some properties to cover the debt on others, but the market was soft, buyers were cautious, and I couldn't get anywhere close to what I needed. The banks started calling, then threatening, then initiating foreclosure. When? 3 months ago. I've been fighting it, trying to work out payment plans, trying to find solutions. But there aren't any. I'm going to lose everything. The properties, the business, probably the house." He put his head in his hands. "Sarah's situation is almost as bad. Her husband's firm made some aggressive bets that went wrong. They're facing regulatory scrutiny, potential fines, partner liability. They're going to lose the house, probably have to file bankruptcy too." "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "And my parents," he continued, voice breaking slightly. "They co-signed on 3 of my properties, thought they were helping me expand. If I default, they're liable. They'll lose their house too. Everything they've built over 40 years, gone." I absorbed this. The entire family, financially destroyed. The success stories unraveling simultaneously. "What do you need?" I asked carefully. "Help," he said simply. "Financial help. Someone who can step in, manage the crisis, work with the banks, structure settlements. Someone who understands complex financial situations and can navigate this." "Have you talked to bankruptcy attorneys?" 3 of them. They all say the same thing. We're too deep. Too many creditors. Too much debt. Too complicated. They can file the paperwork, but they can't save anything. We're looking at total liquidation. "And you think I can help how?" He looked at me directly. "You've always been good with systems, with details, with complex problem solving. I thought maybe you could look at everything, find something the attorneys missed, help us structure a way out." It took me a moment to process this. They wanted me, the weak one, the one they'd dismissed for decades, to save them, to use the skills they'd never valued to solve the crisis they'd created through the aggressive, confident approach they'd always celebrated. "Michael," I said carefully, I'm a database administrator. I don't know bankruptcy law or debt restructuring or negotiating with banks. But you understand systems. You understand how things connect. You could learn the rest. In how much time? We have maybe 60 days before everything starts getting seized. Courts, auctions, forced sales. 60 days to learn complex financial law and save 3 separate households from bankruptcy. 60 days to accomplish what professional attorneys said was impossible. And if I can't fix it? I asked. Then we lose everything anyway. But at least we tried. I looked at my brother, this man who'd outshone me my entire life, who'd succeeded where I'd been modest, who'd been praised while I'd been dismissed. Now, sitting in my living room, asking for rescue. Why me? I asked quietly. Why not hire specialist attorneys? Why not work with financial consultants who do this professionally? Because we can't afford them anymore, he said flatly. We're broke. Actually broke. Negative broke. The only people who can help us are people who do it for free, because we're family. There it was. Not asking because they valued me. Not asking because they respected my capabilities. Asking because I was free labor. Because they'd run out of options and I was the last resort. I need to think about it, I said. There's no time to think. Every day that passes, the situation gets worse. I still need to think. He left frustrated. Not angry. He didn't have the luxury of anger, but clearly disappointed that I hadn't immediately agreed to drop everything and save them. After he left, Rachel and I sat in silence for a long moment. What are you thinking? She asked finally. I'm thinking about a party 10 years ago, about the word weak, about 30 people who heard it and said nothing. You're not seriously considering saying no? I don't know what I'm considering yet. They're your family. Are they? I asked. Because family implies mutual care, mutual respect, mutual support. What they're describing sounds like exploitation. Come fix our crisis for free because we can't afford to pay professionals and you're obligated by blood. You have the skills they need. I have database skills. I don't have bankruptcy law skills. There's a difference. But you could help. You could try. At what cost? 60 days of 16-hour workdays, learning fields I've never studied, trying to accomplish what professionals said can't be done? 60 days of being screamed at when I can't fix it, blamed when it falls apart anyway, used and then discarded once the crisis passes? Rachel didn't answer. They called me weak, I said quietly, in front of guests, in their house, and no one contradicted it. Not my parents, not my siblings, not anyone. They let that become the truth about me. And now they need you. Now they need someone, anyone. I'm just the closest person who might help for free. I sat with that realization, felt its weight, felt the choice crystallizing. Save them, prove the label wrong, show I was never weak, or walk away, maintain boundaries, let consequences unfold. Neither option felt good. One felt like betraying family, the other felt like betraying myself. What are you going to do? Rachel asked. I'm going to call them back tomorrow, I said, and I'm going to tell them the truth. I called Michael the next morning, asked if we could meet with everyone involved, him, Sarah, our parents. One conversation, everyone present. They came to our house that evening. All 5 of them, Michael, Sarah, my mother, my father, Sarah's husband David. They filled our living room with tension and desperation. My father looked smaller than I remembered. My mother's face was tight with stress. Sarah had been crying. David looked angry, probably at being dragged into the family drama. Thanks for meeting, I said, staying calm. Michael explained the situation. I wanted to understand it fully before responding. There's not much time, my father said. We need to make decisions. I understand, and I want to be clear about what I can and can't do. You can help, my mother said. You've always been good with complicated things, with details. I noticed the shift in language. Suddenly I was good with details instead of weak. Suddenly, my skills were valuable instead of inadequate. Suddenly, I was capable instead of deficient. Funny how crisis changes assessment. I appreciate that, I said carefully. But I want to be realistic. I'm not a bankruptcy attorney. I'm not a financial restructuring specialist. I don't have the expertise to navigate what Michael described. But you could learn, Sarah insisted. You could figure it out. You're smart enough. Smart enough. Another newly discovered quality. Learning takes time, I said. Time you don't have. Even if I worked on this full-time for 60 days, there's no guarantee I'd find solutions that professional attorneys couldn't find. But you'd try, my mother said. That's all we're asking. Just try. I looked at them. These people who'd defined me as weak, who'd dismissed me for decades, who were now reframing my qualities as assets because they needed something from me. Can I ask something? I said quietly. Of course, my father said. Do you remember a party 10 years ago? Family gathering? Guests were there? Confused looks. No one immediately remembered. Someone said something about me, called me something. Do you remember what? Silence. Uncomfortable shifting. Uncle Brian, my mother said slowly. He made a comment. What did he say? No one wanted to answer. He called me weak, I said. Said I'd always been the weak one, in front of 30 people. Do you remember what happened after he said that? More silence. Nothing happened, I continued. No one corrected him, no one defended me, not my parents, not my siblings, not anyone. You all just let it stand. Let it become the official family assessment of who I am. It was just Brian being Brian, my father said dismissively. He says stupid things sometimes. But you didn't say it was stupid. You didn't contradict it. You let everyone think it was true. We didn't think it was true, my mother protested. You just didn't think it was false enough to correct, I said. Where is this going? Michael asked impatiently. We don't have time for old grievances. This isn't old, I said. This is current. This is relevant. Because you're asking me to save you, to use skills you've never valued, to sacrifice time and energy for people who spent decades making it clear I wasn't good enough. That's not fair, Sarah said, isn't it? When have any of you valued what I do? When have any of you treated me as capable? When have any of you seen me as anything but the weak one who couldn't quite measure up? We never said you were weak, my father said. No, you just never said I wasn't. Which is the same thing. The room was silent. I need you to understand something, I continued. I'm not refusing to help because I'm bitter. I'm refusing because I can't help. Because what you need requires expertise I don't have. Because professionals who do this for a living told you it's not fixable, and you're asking me to fix it anyway because I'm free. We're family, my mother said, voice breaking. Doesn't that mean anything? It does, I said. It means I'm sad this happened to you. It means I hope you find a way through it. It means I'll be here emotionally if you need support. But not practically, Michael said bitterly. Not in the way you're asking. Not sacrificing 60 days to attempt something I'm not qualified to do and will probably fail at anyway. So, you're just going to let us lose everything? Sarah demanded. I'm not letting you lose anything. You lost it through your own financial decisions. I'm just declining to pretend I can undo consequences I had no part in creating. We're your family, my mother repeated, like that changed the math. You are, I agreed. But family isn't a weapon you get to deploy in crisis when it's convenient. Family is supposed to be there before the crisis, supporting, respecting, valuing each other. And you didn't do that for me, not when I needed it, not for 30 years. So this is revenge? My father asked. No, this is boundaries. This is me being realistic about my capabilities and honest about our relationship. This is me saying, I care about you, but I can't save you, and I'm not going to destroy myself trying. I stood up, signaling the conversation was ending. I'm sorry, I said, meaning it. I'm genuinely sorry you're going through this. But I'm not the solution. I never was. You just ran out of other options and convinced yourselves I might be. They left slowly, reluctantly, hoping I'd change my mind. My mother cried. My father looked at me with something like disappointment, the same look I'd seen 30 years ago when I wouldn't fight the kid who'd been harassing me. Sarah was angry. Michael was bitter. David didn't look at me at all, and I felt relief. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Just relief that I'd said what was true rather than what was wanted. Relief that I'd maintained boundaries rather than sacrificing myself for people who'd never valued me. Rachel hugged me after they left. That was hard, she said. Yeah. Do you think you did the right thing? I don't know, but I think I did the only thing I could do and still respect myself. They're going to lose everything. I know, and I'm sad about that, but I can't fix it, and trying would just add me to the list of casualties. We sat together in the quiet house. Outside, the evening settled into night. Inside, I felt the weight of the decision, but not the regret. I'd been called weak my entire life, and now, by refusing to break myself trying to fix the unfixable, I'd proven I was strong. Strong enough to say no, strong enough to maintain boundaries, strong enough to let people I loved face consequences I couldn't prevent. The weak one would have said yes, would have tried, would have failed, and been blamed for failing. The strong one said no, and lived with it. The next 2 months were as brutal as Michael predicted. Foreclosures proceeded, properties were auctioned, bankruptcy was filed by all 3 households, Michael, Sarah, my parents. I heard about it in fragments, a text from my mother, a terse email from my father, brief updates that carried accusation underneath. This is happening. You could have prevented it. You chose not to. I didn't respond to the accusations, just offered sympathy for the situation, reiterated that I couldn't have fixed it, maintained distance. The family told other relatives that I'd refused to help. The story spread, probably with embellishments. I became the villain in their narrative, the ungrateful son who abandoned his family in crisis, who had resources he wouldn't share, who valued grudges over blood. Rachel's family heard the stories, asked if they were true. Sort of, Rachel told them. They asked him to solve financial problems he's not qualified to solve. He said no. They're calling that abandonment. But you're doing well financially? Her mother asked carefully. We're comfortable. And you didn't help them? We didn't help them fix problems we didn't cause and couldn't solve. There's a difference. Rachel's family didn't push further, but I could see the questions in their eyes. Questions about obligation and family and what we owe people in crisis. 6 months after my conversation with Michael, I got an unexpected call, a number I didn't recognize. It was my Uncle Brian, the one who'd called me weak. I heard what happened, he said without preamble. With Michael and Sarah and your parents. Yeah, I heard you didn't help. I couldn't help. Different skill set. That's not what I heard. What did you hear? I heard you were doing well financially, that you could have bailed them out if you wanted to. That's not accurate. Which part? The part where bailing them out was possible. Their debt was in the millions, way beyond anything Rachel and I could cover even if we liquidated everything. Pause. They said you refused to even try. They asked me to learn bankruptcy law in 60 days and save 3 separate households from financial collapse. I said that wasn't realistic. That's not refusing to try. That's being honest about capability. Longer pause. I didn't know it was that bad, Brian said quietly. Most people don't. They just hear family needed help and he said no and assume I'm the asshole. Are you angry about that? Not really. People are going to think what they think. I can't control that. What about me? He asked. Are you angry about what I said at the party? I thought about it. Not angry, just disappointed that no one corrected you. I was drunk and stupid and wrong. I know. You're not weak, Brian said. I see that now. Took me too long to see it, but I see it. Thanks. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, setting boundaries, not sacrificing yourself for something you couldn't fix. I appreciate that. They're going to be okay, Brian added. Michael's working for someone else now, managing properties instead of owning them. Sarah and David are rebuilding. Your parents are living smaller but managing. They're not destroyed, just humbled. Good. I didn't want them destroyed. I know. That's why I called. To tell you that you're not the villain they're making you out to be. You're just the one who was honest when everyone else wanted magical thinking. We talked for a few more minutes, then ended the call amicably. And I realized something. The people who mattered, the people whose opinions I actually valued, understood. Rachel understood. Brian eventually understood. My close friends understood. The people who didn't understand were the people whose respect I'd stopped seeking years ago. Life moves on. Crises pass. Families adapt to new configurations. 3 years after the bankruptcies, my relationship with my family had evolved into something distant, but not hostile. We saw each other at major holidays, exchanged polite messages on birthdays, maintained the social structure of family while lacking the emotional substance. My parents had downsized to a small condo. My father had retired early, supplementing Social Security with part-time consulting. My mother worked at a local bookstore, something she claimed to enjoy more than her previous corporate job. Michael was managing someone else's real estate portfolio, making decent money, rebuilding slowly, but no longer the confident developer dominating conversations at parties. Sarah and David had moved across the country. Fresh start, away from the social embarrassment of their bankruptcy. We kept in touch superficially, occasional texts, holiday cards, nothing deep. And I had continued building what I'd been building for 13 years now. Rachel and I had crossed the $1 million net worth threshold. We'd had a child, a daughter, Emily, now 18 months old. We lived comfortably but not ostentatiously in the same modest house, driving the same reliable cars. The family knew almost nothing about our actual financial situation. They'd stopped asking years ago, after the bankruptcies. Stopped because asking about money reminded them of what had happened, of who'd helped and who hadn't. At Thanksgiving that year, the first family gathering where everyone was present simultaneously in 3 years, there was a moment that crystallized everything. We were at my parents' condo. Small space, everyone squeezed around a table that would have been too small for this gathering in their old house. The meal was potluck rather than catered. The wine was cheap. The entire event had an air of diminished expectations. During dinner, conversation turned to Emily. My mother was holding her, making grandparent faces, being sweet in that way that erases all complicated history. She's so alert, my mother said, so aware. You can tell she's going to be smart. She gets it from Rachel, I said reflexively. And you, my mother added. And then more quietly, you were always smarter than we gave you credit for. The table went silent. It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was an acknowledgement, a recognition that their assessment had been wrong, that the narrative they'd built had been inaccurate. I didn't respond immediately. Let the moment exist without rushing to fill it. Thank you, I said finally. That means something. Michael across the table looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not hostile, not friendly, just resigned. Like he'd finally accepted that the family hierarchy he'd dominated for 30 years no longer existed. How's work going? He asked. Not aggressive, genuinely asking. Good. Challenging, but good. You're still at the same healthcare network? Yeah. Been there 8 years now. That's good. Stability's important. Coming from Michael, who'd chased growth and leverage and expansion until it destroyed him, that observation carried weight. Later, after dinner, my father pulled me aside. I want to say something, he said, about 3 years ago, about what we asked you to do. You don't have to. I do. We were wrong. Not wrong to ask for help. That's what family does. But wrong about what we asked for. Wrong to expect you to fix something that was already broken. Wrong to blame you when you couldn't. I appreciate that. And wrong, he continued, voice dropping, about a lot of other things. About how we saw you. About what we valued. About... He gestured vaguely, encompassing decades of misunderstanding. About everything, really. We all make mistakes, I said. Some mistakes are bigger than others. Some take 30 years to correct. We stood together in uncomfortable silence. I'm proud of you, my father said finally. Not because of your job or your money or any of that external stuff. I'm proud because you knew yourself well enough to set boundaries. Because you were strong enough to say no, even when it was hard. That takes character. Thanks, Dad. Your uncle called you weak once. I should have shut that down immediately. Should have made it clear that was wrong, that you were never weak, just different. And different isn't less. I know that now. I wish we'd helped you know it sooner. We rejoined the family. The rest of the evening was unremarkable. Small talk, dessert, early goodbyes because everyone was tired. As Rachel and I were leaving, my mother hugged me tightly. I love you, she said. I don't say it enough, but I love you. And I'm sorry for all the ways I didn't show it. I love you too, Mom. We drove home in comfortable silence, Emily sleeping in her car seat, the evening settling around us. That felt different, Rachel said. Yeah. Better? Better. Not fixed, but better. Your dad apologized. He did. Are you going to forgive them, eventually? I thought about it. I don't know if forgiveness is the right framework. They didn't deliberately harm me. They just didn't see me clearly. And now they do. That's not something to forgive. That's just growth. But you're not angry anymore. No, I'm not angry. I'm just clear about boundaries, about what I will and won't do, about what family means and what it doesn't. They called you weak, Rachel said quietly. And you turned out to be the strongest one. Not strongest, just the one who survived with integrity intact. We got home, put Emily to bed, sat together in our living room, the same room where my family had begged for help 3 years earlier. Do you ever regret it? Rachel asked. Saying no? Sometimes, when I think about what they lost, when I imagine their fear and stress and humiliation, in those moments, I wonder if I should have tried anyway. But then I remember that trying wouldn't have changed anything, that I couldn't have saved them, that attempting the impossible would have just added me to the casualty list, and I don't regret choosing to stay whole. That's healthy. Is it? I'm still not sure. Maybe healthy people would have sacrificed more. Maybe healthy people would have broken themselves trying to help. Or maybe, Rachel said, healthy people know that you can't pour from an empty cup, that saving yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. I pulled her close. When did you get so wise? I married someone who taught me the difference between weakness and wisdom.